The crash of shattering glass sliced through the silence of Kevin's cabin. He bolted upright from his cot, heart hammering against his ribs. 3 years of solitude in this remote outpost, and now this. The digital clock's red glow cut through the darkness. 2:13 a.m. Kevin reached for the pulse rifle beneath his bed, a relic from his battlefield surgeon days. The weapon felt foreign in his hands after so long. He had chosen this life of isolation to escape violence, to forget the horrors he'd witnessed during the interplanetary conflicts with the Zeri. Yet here he was, weapon in hand, adrenaline coursing through his veins. A series of thuds echoed from the front of the cabin, followed by a crash and a distinctly female groan. Not human. The pitch was wrong, too resonant. Kevin's grip tightened on the rifle. "Is anyone there?" he called out, voice steady despite the fear churning in his gut. No answer came, only labored breathing and another pained moan. Kevin edged toward his cabin door, the old floorboards creaking beneath his weight. "I'm armed," he warned, flicking on the lights with his free hand. What he saw made him lower his weapon immediately. A Zeri female lay sprawled across his floor, having apparently crashed through his window. Her blue-green skin was slick with a silvery substance, blood or sweat. He couldn't tell. Her combat armor, a semi-organic exoskeleton that merged with Zeri biology, appeared to be malfunctioning, parts of it pulsing with an unnatural glow. But what caught Kevin's attention was the massive swelling between her legs. The area from her lower abdomen to mid-thigh was distended, throbbing visibly, even beneath her armor. She couldn't stand. That much was obvious. One glance told Kevin this was no ordinary injury. "Help!" she gasped, her voice accented but understandable. Zeri troops rarely spoke the human language. This one was different. "You, doctor." Her eyes, electric blue with horizontal pupils, locked onto his. Kevin hesitated. Yes, he had been a doctor, one of the best battlefield surgeons in the quadrant. But that was before the nightmares, before he'd seen too many die under his hands, before he'd retreated to this cabin at the edge of the border territories. "Not anymore," he said. The Zeri woman's face contorted in agony. "Please," she managed, gesturing weakly at the swelling. "Pelvic gland overload. Can't walk. Will die." Kevin's medical instincts overrode his hesitation. He set the rifle aside and approached cautiously. "What happened?" he asked, kneeling beside her but maintaining distance. Even injured, a Zeri warrior could be lethal. "Ambush," she explained between pained breaths. "Took enhancer. For battle. Too much. System. Overloading." She writhed suddenly, a fresh wave of pain washing over her. "Need immediate treatment." Kevin's mind raced. He knew the basics of Zeri physiology from his military days. They were humanoid, but with significant biological differences. Their glandular systems were particularly complex, designed for both combat and reproduction. But pelvic gland overload? That wasn't something covered in his training. "I don't know how to treat Zeri physiology for this condition," he admitted. "You have medical bay?" she asked, teeth clenched. Kevin nodded. He maintained a small but well-equipped medical facility in the back room, force of habit from his surgeon days, and occasionally useful for treating his own injuries in this wilderness. "Then help me there," she insisted. "I guide, you treat." Kevin weighed his options. Helping a Zeri soldier could be considered treason under current Earth policies. The wars might have reached a fragile ceasefire, but tensions remained high. Yet the Hippocratic oath he'd taken still meant something to him, despite everything he'd seen. "What's your name?" he asked, making his decision. "Suena," she replied, her eyes showing a flicker of surprise at the question. Names were rarely exchanged between humans and Zeri. "I'm Kevin," he said, sliding an arm cautiously around her shoulders. "Let's get you to the medical bay." Her weight surprised him, heavier than a human of similar size would be, thanks to the dense muscle structure and armor. The journey across his cabin was slow and painful, with Suena unable to support herself on her legs due to the swelling. Her breathing came in sharp, erratic bursts, and her skin burned against his, much hotter than the standard Zeri body temperature he remembered from his field manual. The medical bay was small but functional, dominated by an examination table and various equipment Kevin had salvaged from decommissioned military hospitals. He helped Suena onto the table, where she immediately curled into a fetal position, hands clutching at the swollen area. "Scanner!" she gasped, pointing to the diagnostic equipment in the corner. "Need to see damage." Kevin powered up the advanced medical scanner, a military-grade device capable of penetrating most biological material to provide detailed imagery. He ran it over Suena's body, focusing on the swollen region. The scanner's screen displayed alarming results. Her core temperature was 110 degrees, dangerously high, even for a Zeri. The swelling itself was a complex mass of engorged tissue, with pressure readings that threatened to rupture several major blood vessels. "What am I looking at here?" Kevin asked, showing her the screen. Suena's eyes widened at the readings. "Worse than thought," she mumbled. "Flare reaction." "Flare?" Kevin asked, already gathering cooling packs from his supplies. "After battle. Zeri bodies produce flare. Hormonal surge." She winced, her back arching involuntarily. "Normal, but enhancer made it uncontrollable. Pelvic gland. Overloaded." Kevin placed the cooling packs around her body, trying to bring her temperature down. "What's the standard treatment for this?" "No treatment," she said. "Usually passes, naturally. But this," she gestured at the swelling. "Too much. Armor trying to compensate, making it worse." Kevin studied the armor more carefully. The semi-organic material seemed to be pulsing in rhythm with her body, but instead of helping, it appeared to be amplifying the reaction. "We need to remove the armor," he concluded. Suena nodded weakly. "Locks. Here, here, and here." She indicated points along her torso and hips. "Biological, not mechanical." Kevin hesitated. "I don't know the procedure for Zeri armor removal." "Press firmly," she instructed. "Recognition sequence, 3 pulses, quick." Kevin placed his fingers on the first lock point and applied pressure. To his surprise, the armor responded, a small section loosening around her upper torso. He repeated the process with the other points, and gradually, pieces of the armor began to detach. As the chest plate came away, Kevin noticed something unexpected. The armor wasn't merely external protection. It had neural connections, thin filaments that separated from Suena's skin with a sound like tearing Velcro. She hissed in pain with each disconnection. "This is integrated into your nervous system," Kevin observed, shocked. "All Zeri armor is," she explained, "makes us better weapons." The word weapons gave Kevin pause. He'd always viewed the Zeri as enemies, as threats. But the vulnerability in Suena's eyes, the pain in her voice, it humanized her in a way his military training had never allowed for. With the upper armor removed, Kevin could see more clearly how the swelling affected her. Her normally muscular abdomen was distended, and the swelling extended down between her thighs, causing them to splay awkwardly apart. The area pulsed with an internal pressure that looked excruciating. "Lower armor! Must remove too," Suena insisted, her breath coming in shorter gasps. "Quickly!" Kevin found the lock points for the lower body armor and began the removal process. This section was more challenging, with more neural connections and a tighter fit around the affected area. As he worked, he noticed Suena watching him intently, studying his reactions. "You're not disgusted?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Kevin paused, meeting her gaze. "I'm a doctor," he said simply. "Or I was." This is a medical emergency, nothing more. Something flickered across her face. Relief, perhaps, or gratitude. It vanished quickly behind another grimace of pain. With the last piece of armor removed, Suena lay on the examination table in what appeared to be a thin, skin-tight undersuit that covered her from neck to ankles. The material was stretched taut over the swollen area, which now looked even more alarmingly distended. Kevin ran the scanner again. Without the armor's interference, the readings were clearer and more troubling. The pressure was continuing to build, and her core temperature had risen another degree despite the cooling packs. "This isn't working," Kevin said, concern evident in his voice. "What else can we do?" Suena's eyes were beginning to glaze over, a sign she was slipping into shock. "Manual. Pressure release," she managed to say. "Direct contact. Required." Kevin frowned. "Direct contact, you mean?" "Skin to skin," she confirmed, her voice strained. "Armor normally regulates, but now—" She didn't finish the sentence, her body convulsing suddenly as another wave of pain hit her. Kevin's medical training battled with his personal boundaries. This went beyond standard treatment protocols into territory that felt uncomfortable, inappropriate even. Yet the scanner readings left no doubt. Without intervention, the pressure would continue to build until something ruptured. "I should sedate you first," he decided, reaching for his medical kit. "No!" Suena's hand shot out, grabbing his wrist with surprising strength. "Sedatives make worse. Need full consciousness. For release." Kevin hesitated, torn between professional distance and the urgent need to help. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," she insisted, her eyes clearing momentarily with determination. "Please, we'll die otherwise." The monitor beeped a warning. Her heart rate was climbing dangerously. Kevin made his decision. "Tell me exactly what to do," he said, setting aside his reservations. "Undersuit. Must remove," she instructed. "Then, direct pressure. Here." She indicated the center of the swelling. "Circular motion, until pressure disperses." Kevin swallowed hard, but nodded. "I'll need to cut the undersuit away," he said, reaching for surgical scissors. "Try to stay still." The material was surprisingly tough, resisting the scissors initially. Kevin worked carefully, cutting along the sides of her body, avoiding the most swollen areas. As he peeled the undersuit away, he maintained a clinical detachment, focusing on the medical necessity rather than the intimacy of the situation. With the undersuit removed, the full extent of the condition became clear. The swelling was centered around what appeared to be a major gland nexus. The blue-green skin stretched and shiny. Veins pulsed visibly beneath the surface, and the area radiated heat that Kevin could feel without touching. "Now," Suena said, her voice barely a whisper. "Press, firmly." Kevin took a deep breath, steeling himself. He placed his hands on either side of the swelling first, assessing the tension and heat. Then, slowly, he moved one hand to the center, applying gentle but firm pressure. The effect was immediate and startling. Suena's entire body arched, a sound between a gasp and a cry escaping her lips. For a moment, Kevin feared he'd hurt her, but the scanner showed a slight decrease in pressure. It was working. "Continue," she urged, her eyes closed tight. "Circular motion." Kevin complied, maintaining pressure while moving his hand in a slow circle. The swollen tissue beneath his palm felt unnaturally hot and dense, pulsing with its own rhythm. Gradually, he increased the pressure, guided by the readings on the scanner and Suena's reactions. Time seemed to stretch as they remained locked in this strange, intimate procedure. Kevin focused entirely on the medical aspects, monitoring her vitals, watching for signs of improvement, adjusting his technique based on feedback. Yet he couldn't help but notice the changing nature of Suena's responses. What had begun as pained gasps slowly transformed into something different, something that made maintaining clinical detachment increasingly difficult. "Is this normal?" he asked hesitantly, as a particularly strong pulse beneath his hand coincided with a sound from Suena that was decidedly not pain. "Yes," she managed, her voice strained but clear. "Flare is both pain and other sensations. Cannot separate." Kevin nodded, continuing his ministrations with renewed focus. The swelling was beginning to subside slightly, the tissue softening under his touch. Suena's temperature was dropping, degree by agonizing degree. Just as he thought they might be making progress, a sudden bang from outside the cabin jolted them both. "What was that?" Kevin whispered, his hands stilling. Suena's eyes snapped open, instantly alert despite her condition. "Zeri scouts!" she hissed. "Tracking me!" Kevin's blood ran cold. "How many?" "2, maybe 3, she estimated, struggling to sit up. "Must hide. Quickly." "You can't move yet," Kevin protested, gently but firmly pressing her back down. "The treatment isn't complete." Another noise from outside, closer this time. Footsteps crunching in the snow. "No time," Suena insisted. "They find us. Both dead." Kevin made a split-second decision. "I have a bunker," he said, already gathering Suena into his arms. "Below the cabin. But we need to move now." The effort of lifting her sent pain shooting through his back. But adrenaline gave him strength. Suena bit back a cry as the movement jostled her still swollen body, cradling her against his chest. Kevin made his way to a concealed trapdoor in the corner of the medical bay. Just as he reached it, the front door of the cabin splintered inward. Kevin moved faster than he had in years, yanking open the trapdoor with one hand while supporting Suena with the other. The bunker below was dark and cold, but it offered their only chance. He lowered her down first, then followed quickly, pulling the trapdoor shut above them just as heavy footsteps entered the cabin. The bunker was small, but well-equipped, another remnant of Kevin's paranoid early days in the wilderness. Soundproofed walls, a separate ventilation system, emergency supplies, and a small cot in the corner. Most importantly, it was shielded from standard detection technology. Kevin laid Suena on the cot, then moved silently to activate the dim emergency lighting. Her condition had worsened during the move, the swelling pulsing more visibly, her breathing shallow and rapid. "Need to continue," she whispered urgently. "Now worse, because interrupted." Kevin glanced up at the ceiling, where muffled sounds of the Zeri scouts searching his cabin filtered through. "They'll hear us," he whispered back. "Not if—" "Quiet," Suena insisted, reaching for his hand and guiding it back to the swollen gland. "Please." Kevin hesitated, then nodded. Without the scanner, he'd have to rely on Suena's reactions to guide him. He resumed the pressure, moving his hand in careful circles over the heated flesh. Above them, the scouts continued their search, occasionally speaking to each other in the clicking, rhythmic language of the Zeri. Kevin strained to hear, but couldn't make out what they were saying. He focused instead on Suena, on the gradual softening of the swelling beneath his hand, on her increasingly controlled breathing. The intimate nature of their situation wasn't lost on him. A human doctor and a Zeri warrior, hiding together in a bunker while he performed this unorthodox treatment. It defied everything his military training had taught him about the enemy. Yet in this moment, she wasn't the enemy. She was simply a patient in need. As minutes stretched into an hour, the sounds from above eventually faded. The scouts had either left or were waiting silently, hoping to catch them off guard. Either way, they needed to continue. "Better," Suena murmured, her voice stronger than before. "But not finished." Kevin nodded, adjusting his position to relieve the strain on his arm. "Tell me what else I need to do." Suena's eyes met his, a complexity of emotions passing through them. Final stage. Most difficult, she said. Requires deeper pressure. More intimate. Kevin's professional demeanor wavered slightly. Meaning? Must stimulate. Central node, she explained, gesturing to a specific point within the swollen area. Like your human sexual pressure points, but different purpose. Kevin hesitated, ethical concerns flooding his mind. That crosses a line, he said quietly. Not sexual for Zeri, she clarified, though her expression suggested it wasn't quite that simple. Medical necessity, final pressure, must release. The footsteps returned overhead, heavier this time. Something crashed to the floor. They were searching more aggressively now. Kevin made his decision, setting aside his reservations. Guide me, he said, his voice steady. Suena took his hand and positioned his fingers over a specific point within the swelling. Press here. Then, increase gradually, she instructed. When pulse strongest, maintain pressure until release. Kevin followed her guidance, applying focused pressure to the indicated spot. The tissue felt different here, denser, more responsive. Suena's reaction was immediate, her body tensing, back arching slightly off the cot. Good, she breathed, her voice barely audible. Continue. Kevin maintained the pressure, gradually increasing as instructed. He monitored Suena's breathing, her expressions, the subtle changes in her body's response. The swelling began to pulse more rhythmically, the heat intensifying under his touch. Above them, a heavy thud suggested the scouts had overturned a piece of furniture. They were getting closer to the bunker. Faster, Suena urged, her voice tight with both pain and something else. Almost. Kevin increased the tempo of his movements, maintaining the pressure. Suena's breathing quickened, her hands gripping the edges of the cot. The swelling began to contract and expand rapidly, the pulses coming faster and stronger. A sudden bang directly above them made Kevin freeze. The scouts were right over the trapdoor. Suena's eyes flew open in panic. Don't stop, she pleaded. Almost complete. Kevin resumed, working faster, driven by urgent necessity. Suena bit her lip to keep from making noise, her entire body trembling with the effort. Then, just as the footsteps seemed to move away from the trapdoor, it happened. A final, powerful pulse beneath Kevin's hand, and the swelling began to subside dramatically. Suena's body went rigid, then limp, a long, silent exhale escaping her lips. The release of pressure was so sudden and complete that Kevin momentarily feared something had ruptured. But a quick check showed the opposite. The gland was returning to normal size, the heat dissipating, the dangerous tension gone. Suena lay still, eyes closed, breathing deeply. For the first time since she'd crashed through his window, her expression showed something other than pain, relief, profound and complete. Kevin withdrew his hand, reaching for a medical blanket to cover her. Rest, he whispered. Your body needs time to recover. Suena's eyes opened slowly, focusing on his face with new clarity. Thank you, she said, her voice steady for the first time. Few would help. Zeri warrior. Kevin shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. I was a doctor before I was a soldier, he said simply. Above them, the sounds of searching continued, but seemed to be moving toward the front of the cabin. Kevin relaxed slightly, allowing himself to hope they might not find the bunker after all. They search for behavioral trace, Suena explained, seeing his attention directed upward. Energy signature, from flare. Will they find it? Kevin asked. Not now, she said, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. You grounded me. Trace gone. Kevin wasn't entirely sure what grounding meant in this context, but he was relieved it seemed to have worked. He checked Suena's forehead. Her temperature was returning to normal, the fever breaking. Why did you come here? He asked. the question that had been nagging at him since she'd first crashed through his window. "Why me?" Suena was quiet for a moment, considering. "Knew of you," she finally said. "Doctor who saved many, even Zeri prisoners. When Enhancer backfired, needed someone who might help, not kill." Kevin was startled. His reputation had reached even the Zeri forces? He'd treated enemy combatants when they'd come under his care? Yes. But that had been years ago. "How bad would it have been?" he asked, gesturing to where the swelling had been. "If I hadn't helped." "Death," she said simply. "Painful. Gland rupture. Blood poisoning. Organ failure." Kevin nodded solemnly. Despite the uncomfortable nature of the treatment, he couldn't regret his decision to help. A life was a life, regardless of species or allegiance. "You should rest," he said, standing carefully to avoid making noise. "I'll keep watch. Make sure they leave." Suena reached out suddenly, catching his wrist. "Why help enemy?" she asked, genuine curiosity in her eyes. Kevin considered the question. "I've seen enough death," he finally said. "Human, Zeri. Doesn't matter anymore. I couldn't watch another life end if I could prevent it." Something shifted in Suena's expression. A newfound respect, perhaps? She released his wrist with a nod. The next few hours passed in tense silence. The scouts searched the cabin thoroughly. At one point, standing directly above the bunker, Kevin and Suena remained still, barely breathing, until finally, the sounds of footsteps receded, followed by the distant whine of transport engines starting up. Even then, they waited another hour before Kevin dared to open the trapdoor and peer out. The cabin was a mess, furniture overturned, supplies scattered, but empty of threats. "They're gone," he confirmed, helping Suena up from the bunker. She was stronger now, able to support her own weight, though still unsteady. In the light of the cabin, Kevin got his first clear look at her fully recovered state. Without the armor and the swelling, she was lean and muscular, her blue-green skin marked with what appeared to be ceremonial scarring along her shoulders and arms. The recovered gland area was now just a slight mound, proportional to her athletic build. Kevin found a spare set of clothes. They'd be too large, but better than nothing. "Here," he offered, averting his eyes as she dressed. "Modesty. Human concept," Suena noted, though she accepted the clothing. "Zeri bodies. Functional, not private." "Well, we're on Earth now," Kevin said, busying himself with straightening the overturned furniture. "Human customs apply." Once dressed, Suena moved around the cabin curiously, examining Kevin's sparse belongings. "You live alone," she observed. "Far from others. Why?" Kevin paused in his cleaning. How to explain his self-imposed exile? The nightmares that still woke him, the faces of those he couldn't save, the weight of decisions made in the chaos of war. "I needed space," he said simply. "After the war, after everything I saw, I couldn't be around people anymore." Suena nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Isolation, healing." "Something like that," Kevin agreed, surprised by her understanding. They worked together to restore order to the cabin, falling into an unexpectedly comfortable rhythm. As dawn approached, Kevin prepared a simple meal. He wasn't sure what Zeri typically ate, but Suena accepted the offered food without comment. As they ate, Kevin found himself studying her with professional curiosity. "The enhancer you mentioned," he said. "What was it supposed to do?" Suena's expression darkened. "Make better weapon," she said bitterly. "Zeri females. Used for combat, breeding, diplomatic mergers. Enhancer increases all functions. Makes more valuable." "You talk about yourself like you're a tool," Kevin observed, troubled. "To Zeri leadership. Am tool," she confirmed. "Why left? Why?" She gestured vaguely at her body. "This happened. Took enhancer. fought way out, but system overloaded. Kevin set down his fork, processing this new information. You're a deserter? Suena met his gaze evenly. Yes. Refused to be merged for politics. Refused to be weapon only. The implications were significant. No wonder the scouts had been searching so thoroughly. They weren't just tracking a random Zeri, they were hunting a fugitive. You're in danger, Kevin stated. Always in danger, she shrugged. But worth it, for freedom. Kevin understood that sentiment all too well. Hadn't he also chosen a difficult path to escape what others expected of him? What will you do now? He asked. Suena looked out the window at the lightening sky. Recover strength, continue moving, find others who think like me. There are other Zeri deserters? Small number, she confirmed. Growing, not all want to be weapons. Kevin found himself admiring her courage. To break from everything she knew, to risk death for freedom, it showed a strength beyond physical prowess. You could stay, he heard himself saying, surprising them both. At least until you're fully recovered. The scouts won't return immediately. They'll report back first. Suena studied him, head tilted slightly. Why offer? Risk for you. Kevin couldn't fully explain it himself. Perhaps it was the doctor in him, unwilling to release a patient before complete healing. Perhaps it was the lonely man, starved for meaningful interaction after years of solitude. Or perhaps it was something deeper, a recognition of a kindred spirit, someone else who had chosen a difficult path toward freedom. Sometimes, he said carefully, helping someone else is the only way to help yourself. Suena considered this, then nodded slowly. We'll stay. 3 days. Then must move. Kevin nodded, relieved and uncertain all at once. What had he gotten himself into? The days that followed established an unexpected routine. Kevin monitored Suena's recovery, performing regular checks to ensure the gland remained stable. Suena, for her part, proved to be a surprisingly considerate houseguest, helping with chores and respecting Kevin's occasional need for solitude. They talked, hesitantly at first, then with increasing openness. Kevin learned about Zeri culture beyond the military aspects he'd been taught. Their complex family structures, their art and music, their spiritual beliefs centered around celestial bodies. In turn, he shared stories of Earth, of human diversity, of the life he'd left behind when he'd retreated to the wilderness. On the second night, as they sat before the fireplace, Suena asked the question Kevin had been dreading. Why really leave? Not just space. Something specific. Kevin stared into the flames. Memories surging. The battlefield hospital. The endless stream of wounded. The young soldier with the abdominal wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. No matter what Kevin did. The moment when he realized he couldn't save one more life. Couldn't lose one more patient. I failed, he said finally. Not just once. Many times. That's what war is. A series of failures punctuated by occasional successes. But the last one. I couldn't handle it. I broke. Suena listened without judgment, her blue eyes reflecting the firelight. Not failure, she said after a long moment. Limit. All have limits. Doctors aren't supposed to have limits, Kevin said bitterly. We're supposed to save everyone. Impossible goal, Suena observed. Creates broken healers. The simple truth of her statement hit Kevin with unexpected force. Yes, that was exactly what had happened. He'd been broken by an impossible standard, one he'd imposed on himself as much as society had imposed it on him. What about you? He asked, deflecting. What broke you? Made you leave? Suena's expression hardened. Was to be merged, she said. Political union with high commander. Become breeding vessel, diplomatic tool. Saw others, after merger. Empty shells. Decided. Rather die free. Kevin nodded, understanding completely. So you took the enhancer. To fight way out, she confirmed. Worked, until didn't. They fell silent, each contemplating the paths that had led them to this strange intersection of their lives. "Thank you," Suena said suddenly, "for treatment, for seeing person, not enemy." Kevin met her gaze. "Thank you for reminding me what it means to be a healer," he replied. "It's been a long time since I felt useful." Something shifted between them in that moment, a deepening of connection, a recognition of mutual healing that transcended their physical differences. On the morning of the third day, Suena announced her intention to leave as planned. Kevin helped her prepare, providing supplies and a crude map of the surrounding area. "There's an abandoned mining outpost 10 miles east," he explained, marking it on the map. "You can shelter there if needed." Suena nodded, memorizing the route. She had fashioned a makeshift pack from materials in the cabin and wore the clothes Kevin had given her, with modifications to allow for easier movement. As the moment of departure approached, an unexpected heaviness settled in Kevin's chest. 3 days had transformed a desperate emergency into something else entirely, a connection he hadn't realized how badly he needed. At the door, Suena turned to him one last time. "If survive, we'll return," she said, her usual clipped speech softening slightly. "Bring news of others, seeking freedom." Kevin nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Suena stepped closer, studying his face intently. Then, in a move that surprised them both, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, a distinctly human gesture she must have learned from observation. The kiss was brief, but charged with meaning, gratitude, connection, possibility. When she pulled away, her eyes held a new warmth. "Humans say, 'I'll be back,'" she said, her accent shaping the familiar phrase into something new and poignant. "I'll be here," Kevin replied, the words a promise he hadn't known he wanted to make. With a final nod, Suena turned and disappeared into the forest, her blue-green form quickly swallowed by the trees and drifting snow. Kevin stood in the doorway, long after she'd gone, staring at the empty space where she had been, for the first time in years. The solitude of his cabin felt like loneliness. The days after Suena's departure seemed to stretch endlessly. Kevin returned to his routines, gathering firewood, hunting, maintaining his equipment. But they felt hollow now, mechanical rather than meditative. He found himself glancing out the window more often, scanning the tree line for a flash of blue-green skin. At night, he dreamed of the Zeri woman, not just the clinical intimacy of their first encounter, but the conversations that followed, the quiet moments of understanding. He woke from these dreams disoriented, the cabin's emptiness more pronounced than ever. A week passed. Then 2. Kevin began to wonder if Suena had made it to safety, if she'd found the others she sought, or if, perhaps, the Zeri scouts had found her first. He focused his energy on improving the bunker, expanding its supplies, reinforcing its hidden entrance. Practical tasks that he told himself were simply prudent, not preparations for a return he increasingly doubted would come. 3 weeks after Suena's departure, Kevin was chopping wood outside his cabin when a sound from the forest made him freeze. Not the natural rustle of wildlife, but the deliberate movement of something larger. He set down his axe and reached for the pulse rifle he'd taken to carrying again. "Who's there?" he called, voice steady despite the sudden pounding of his heart. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, emerging from between the snow-laden trees, came a familiar figure. Suena looked different, thinner, harder, her exposed skin marked with fresh cuts and what appeared to be burn marks. But she was alive, and she was here. Kevin lowered the rifle, relief flooding through him. "You came back," he said, unable to keep the wonder from his voice. "Sedwood," she replied, approaching slowly. He noticed she walked with a slight limp, favoring her right leg. "You're injured," he observed, professional concern overtaking everything else. Many injuries, she confirmed with a grimace that might have been an attempt at a smile. Why came back? Kevin led her inside, his medical instincts taking over. The cabin, which had seemed so empty just moments before, suddenly felt alive again with her presence. As he treated her wounds, mostly superficial, though the burn on her leg would need time to heal properly, Suena told him what had happened. She'd found others like her, deserters and rebels hiding in the wilderness, but they'd been discovered, their temporary camp attacked. Suena had fought, helping younger deserters escape while she held off the pursuers. Others safe now, she said as Kevin applied regenerative gel to the burn. New location, better hidden. And you? Kevin asked, looking up from his work. Are you safe? Suena's expression was complex, pride, weariness, determination all mingled together. Remove tracker, she said, showing him a small, healing incision behind her ear. Cut out while escaping. Not safe, but free. Kevin nodded, understanding the distinction. Freedom and safety rarely went hand in hand, especially for those who defied powerful systems. Why really return? He asked, finishing the bandage on her leg. There must be better medics among your people. Suena met his gaze directly. Not about medicine, she said simply. About connection. About seeing person, not tool, not enemy. The honesty of her answer caught Kevin off guard. In the weeks of her absence, he'd imagined many scenarios for her return, but hadn't dared hope for this one. What happens now? He asked. Suena's expression turned serious. War coming, she said. Not just Zeri against humans. Zeri against Zeri. Those who want freedom, against those who want control. And you're caught in the middle, Kevin surmised. By choice, she corrected. Fighting for right side? Kevin absorbed this, understanding the implications. The isolated peace he'd built here was an illusion, temporary at best. The wars he'd fled were evolving, not ending. Why tell me this? He asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Need doctor, Suena said. Need someone who sees people, not weapons. She paused, then added more quietly. Need you. The request hung in the air between them, weighted with significance. Kevin had spent years running from conflict, building walls between himself and the suffering of others. Returning meant facing everything he'd tried to escape, the pain, the loss, the impossible choices. Yet, as he looked at Suena, at the determination in her eyes despite her injuries, something shifted within him. Perhaps true healing wasn't found in isolation after all, but in connection, in choosing to help despite the cost, in seeing people as people, not as categories or enemies. When do we leave? He heard himself asking. Suena's expression softened, relief and something more personal shining in her eyes. Soon, she said. But first, recover. Plan. Kevin nodded, already mentally cataloging what supplies they would need, what medical equipment he could transport. It would mean leaving the cabin, his refuge, his hiding place, but he found the prospect less frightening than he would have expected weeks ago. That night, as snow fell gently outside, Kevin and Suena sat before the fire, planning their departure. The conversations were practical, routes, supplies, contingencies, but underneath ran a current of something deeper. Two individuals from different worlds, brought together by chance and pain, now choosing to face an uncertain future together. When Suena reached across the space between them and took his hand, Kevin didn't pull away. Her fingers twined with his, blue-green against pale pink, different yet perfectly fitted. Not just doctor and patient anymore, she said, her voice soft in the firelit room. No, Kevin agreed, squeezing her hand gently. Something else entirely. 3 days later, they were ready. The cabin was secured, essential supplies packed. Kevin's medical equipment carefully stowed in weatherproof containers. They would travel light but prepared, heading first to the rebel camp where Suena's fellow deserters waited. Then, wherever the fight for freedom took them. As dawn broke over the snow-covered forest, Kevin stood at the threshold of his cabin one last time. The solitude he'd sought here had been a bandage over a wound that needed air to heal. Now, stepping away from safety toward purpose, he felt more alive than he had in years. Suena waited a few paces ahead, patient but ready. When Kevin joined her, she didn't speak, just offered a nod of understanding. They moved forward together, into the trees, leaving parallel tracks in the fresh snow. Behind them, the cabin stood empty, a chapter closed. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, the renewal of old wounds and the creation of new ones, but also purpose, connection, and the possibility of healing, not just for themselves, but for others, caught in the machinery of conflict. Kevin adjusted the pack on his shoulders, falling into step beside Suena. The forest embraced them, snow drifting silently through the branches, not running away this time, but moving towards something. Together.